morning,
Oh,
GM, GM, hi everybody.
GM.
GM.
All right, welcome to our spaces.
Thank you. Thanks
Hi,
for having
David.
us.
Hi. Yeah, so I'll just let everybody know a little bit about what's going on here, and then we'll jump right into it. So the point of this spaces is to give some space to metacartel grant recipients to get the word out on whatever projects they're working on. Um, Quite often when people apply for grants with Metacartel, sometimes they don't even ask for any funds. They just want access to the ecosystem so that they can let people know what they're working on. So that's kind of the role that I was hoping that these spaces can fill a little bit. And today we're going to start with our first guests on the this program will be HATS Protocol, which recently received a grant from Metacartel, and we have Spencer Graham, Ninty Nick, and David Earlkman. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly or not. I apologize if I messed it up. And HATS Protocol is a pretty interesting new set of contracts that allow DAOs to become a little bit more efficient, I think, is one of the main goals behind it. So yeah, maybe if you guys want to go ahead and give us a little introduction yourselves, so I don't just bumble it up on you, and then we can jump into some questions. Do you guys mind, like, do you want to go through a presentation uninterrupted, or can I or anybody else just jump in and ask some questions along the way?
Let's keep it informal. I think that'll be good. And is there any way for us to share a screen, or how might we share information?
Definitely Twitter. Twitter Spaces doesn't allow for screen shares,
I'll use the Twitter
unfortunately.
Spaces issue.
Um, yeah, that's a Twitter Spaces thing, unfortunately. But we can definitely, believe that we can share links. Yeah, in the bottom right corner, there is a little talk button there. And I believe if you click that is where we can, yeah,
Cool.
that'll start. That would basically start a tweet thread underneath the Spaces notification, I guess. So.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I would say,
Hey,
yeah, let's get.
Boiler, can you add David as a speaker?
I think I just did that.
Thank you.
Did we get it? Well, he's still showing up as a listener here. Let me try this again. Yeah, okay. I sent the invitation, so.
Well, I
Is
think
he?
a good way for us to start might be to have for
Is
us to
is,
each give a.
is David on computer? I wonder, because you can only speak on mobile with Spaces.
Yeah, that's tripped me up before.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get started, and we'll try to work out that bug. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. Whoever wants to give us a brief rundown on HATS protocol, and then I'll jump in and
Can you hear
ask
me
some
okay?
questions. Yep, I
Is it
got you.
is coming through okay?
Yeah, you're coming through perfect.
Okay, cool. Well, let's do, some quick intros, because I think that our HATS protocol was really born from our own experience in hanging out in DAOs and working in DAOs and designing mechanisms for DAOs. So that context is really important. And I'm happy to go first there. I'm Ninty Nick, and my experience in DAOs started beginning of last year. I was hanging out with some folks about 5 or 6 years ago, learning about decentralized autonomous corporations in an academic context. And I have a background in AI, and that really appealed to me to say, okay, what does it look like to have an organization that's managed by algorithms and mechanisms as opposed to centralized leadership. I've done some work in collective intelligence and AI more broadly. But then at the beginning of last year, it seemed like DAOs were really picking up momentum in terms of the number of people who were participating in them and what they could do. And I started hanging out in Metacartel ecosystem, later joined Raid Guild, and started to try to design new mechanisms for better coordination. And that's been around staking, for accountability, for curation, and later for reputation. And how we got to hats was really seeing that there's a lot of challenges around efficiency and accountability in DAOs. It's like, how do you take the base units of organizational structure and bring those into DAOs? So I just, again, for example, like in Raid Guild, saying, okay, well, if you have a bunch of people who are going to get together and do a project, but someone leaves, what is the downside to leaving? They don't get paid, but what do we have in place to make sure that there is accountability, and that goes directly into like DAO native coordination at the scale of the entire guild. So yeah, that's a little bit long-winded, but that's kind of some of my background in the space. Spencer, David, you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. I could be equally long-winded. I never know how to keep my DAO story short, but the story is, as probably most people here know, but have been into Ethereum for like a pretty good while. Started, even like my free time, my intellectual, and but it wasn't until I found DAOs in like early 2020 that I had the ability to like really start building stuff and doing stuff and like contributing rather than just consuming. And my first experience was in Raid Guild in like early middle of 2020. And I remember having this just an amazing experience of joining together with this group of people who I didn't know, but because of the fact that we were in a DAO together and the structure of Raid Guild as a Moloch DAO, just created this amazingly like safe space in which to experiment and build and learn and like make friends and be vulnerable with each other. And I have this sense that I can articulate much better now, but that like this was what I wanted to like how I wanted to experience things for the rest of my life and how I wanted and I wanted to make that more and more possible for more and more people. And so that led into being a core contributor with DAO House and trying and starting to like help build the infrastructure that would make that stuff possible. But along the way, like as we all do, we kind of notice some of the challenges or things where we need help or where things aren't quite going so well or we need better infrastructure or better tools. And one of those big areas was in like individual responsibility and accountability. We're kind of in this smear of people within a DAO, and that's really awesome for limiting the accumulation of entrenched power and the concentration of power. But it can be a little bit challenging to identify what people as individuals are supposed to be working on, especially as that group starts to get bigger. Um, and I know we've had some of those challenges, and we have done a pretty good job within DAO House, but nonetheless they've been challenges. And so started thinking about mechanisms or stuff uh, along those lines, including with Nick, and then like out of some of those ideas came what ultimately has become uh, Hats, and I've become like really excited about what Hats can do to help make the things that we love about DAOs even better and even more effective, and spread them to many more people. I'm sure we'll get into much more, but that's like both a little bit of my story and also like why I'm so motivated to and so excited by what we're doing here.
Yeah, neat. Thank you. Uh, David, you're up.
All right. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, so my background, I've been doing kind of decentralized coordination work for the past 10 years, primarily in the social impact space and environmental impact work. So it was all about, how can we get multiple actors and many different organizations working in different silos and across sectors to coordinate more effectively to address big, complex social and environmental challenges like stewarding, 1 million acres of land, or addressing labor and human rights issues in technology supply chains, or migrant rights across borders. Uh, all different kinds of issues. We have to be able to work together, and working together is hard when, particularly when we don't have, these kind of hierarchical structures where it's very clear chain of command. Um, Decisions are passed down, people execute them, uh, and what's kind of led me into this world is, I've believed for a long time that we need to be able to coordinate more effectively and in ways that shares power and distributes decision making. And so I'm super motivated to help advance and find ways to make that possible, while not having to resort to the kind of top-down hierarchical structures that we've seen for so long. And I think DAOs have, in a lot of ways, rejected hierarchy because we know the issues associated with hierarchies, with concentration of power and inequality of wealth and the rewards of that work. But and so a lot of DAOs have kind of taken more networked forms, more flatter organizations, and so forth. And that's a lot of the work that I've been engaged in for a long time through Converge, which I started in 2013. And but now we're seeing that, in order to kind of consistently execute and get things done, we do need some structure. We don't want to just live in this tyranny of structurelessness. We do need some structure, but structure that really fits the function of what we're trying to do, and also maintains these and reinforces these values of decentralization, individual autonomy, and and so that's really what we're trying to do with Hats. I feel is provide a DAO native way of structuring our organizations, you know, to the point where we know what needs to get done, and we can identify specific roles or responsibilities around them. We can build a bit more structure, but it's not a single rigid hierarchical structure where there's always somebody or some small group at the top holding all the power. It's really much more fluid structures, more agile structures, multiple hierarchies that are able to emerge when a need is there and execute to get something done, and then it falls away when it's no longer needed. And the people at the top of those particular role hierarchies are the ones with the expertise and the trust or the authority that's needed, as opposed to some just a single actor again, or a small group always at the top. So that addresses some of the issues that I've seen in the networks I've worked with too. They're really good at bringing large groups of people together and um, you know, having interesting conversations, advancing learning, and finding our way through complexity, but challenged around role clarity and consistent execution when it comes to level of complicated problems. And yeah, that's why I'm here, trying to find a way to more effectively coordinate in decentralized ways, and that's what brings us to Hats.
Cool, thank you. I have a question about how you found Ethereum. Like, did you come to Ethereum blockchain trying to find a solution, or like how did you even stumble across DAOs, for example?
Well, I'll just, I guess, speak first because I already have the mic. So the kind of network building work that I've been doing for so long, it really kind of naturally fit with DAOs, because it's all about how do we work together in decentralized ways, and where we're coming together as equals, and distributing decision making, distributing leadership, and and so DAOs have really been kind of my entry into crypto and into Web3, specifically. one of my co-founders at Converge, Zaku. He co-founded Coordinape a couple years ago, and so when I was finishing up my book, Impact Networks, I was kind of tracking what he was doing, and he was Dow pilling me pretty hard, and and so that was kind of my entry. Just seeing it that I feel like DAOs are pushing the envelope of coordination at scale. Again, with these values of anti-capture and decentralization, more than any other space I see right now. And you know, so much of my work was focused kind of on the human element of coordination, and I'm so curious how we can layer on top the right mechanism design, right technological tools, uh, and to be able to truly coordinate at scale in a way that maybe can outcompete traditional organizations and the traditional hierarchical structures that seem to be the dominant organizing paradigm in the world.
Right. You mentioned anti-capture, which is a term that was comes from an article that Spencer wrote back in February-ish, I think it was. Um, and it's been my kind of feeling that that article is sort of what led to HAT's protocol. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit, Spencer?
Sure. Um, they're definitely connected. I think um, I don't know if there's like a direct causality between anti-capture and HATS protocol, but what is definitely the case is in thinking about everything that kind of bubbled up into the anti-capture article and a framework, I got a much better, and who knows if it's right, but I think my got a much better hypothesis or theory about like what we're all doing here, like what DAOs really are, what really makes them unique, and how like power is organized and behaves and the dynamics of power within an organization and how that relates out to outside the organization as well. And it gave me a framework by which to better understand what we mean by or what is important about decentralization and to better understand the different dimensions along which decentralization can happen and how to think about the trade-offs between centralization versus decentralization on each of those dimensions and a better sense of like which of those dimensions, which of those things that you could be decentralized on are more important to be decentralized on. Like where is it actually okay to have some degree of centralization in some sense if we're decentralized in other places? And where that kind of what I kind of realized or learned and part of what ended up being a key theme of the anti-capture article is that it's like where the rubber really meets the road, like where actions actually turn from a like a mental or verbal activity into like real world change, where the action gets executed, is where that's like the most important thing to be decentralized. So in a DAO, we are all taking actions collectively, and it's super important that when we actually are taking the action, that it's the when the transaction is getting executed, when the funds are getting transferred, when the thing is actually being done, that the authority and um, the power to do that is as decentralized as possible within the context that we're in. But that doesn't have to necessarily mean that we are all literally doing the action together. We can be delegating to others or to individuals, and we can have the ability to undelegate, to take that power back because we actually collectively reserve that power. We ultimately have that power. So that kind of led to the notion of, well, we can actually have this thing that is an organization that is a DAO and is decentralized on that kind of executive level. We can have that at the same time as we enable individual people. We can grant individual responsibility to individual people, which led to the idea of roles and how roles are so effective within traditional organizations at giving people individual responsibility and accountability and actually getting shit done in an effective way. So I think that was sort of a I wouldn't call that like an epitome or anything like that, but I kind of realized that we could have that's one way to think about how the idea that we can have both a like fully decentralized organization where it matters most and some of the structures that have made traditional organizations really effective.
Thank you for that. So I think that kind of at the tail end of that sort of leads me to a question that I have for you, Nick. Last year you wrote an article which had to do with the flippening, like coordination flippening, and you're predicting a point. I think that's what you're doing, is kind of predicting a point where DAOs become efficient enough that they actually are better than traditional organizations at some point. But right now there is a lack of efficiency with DAOs, and maybe HATS is one of those solutions to that. Um, and I just kind of realized maybe we didn't really describe what HATS was too much to the audience. So yeah, Nick, if you could fill me in a little bit on your article about flippening, what that means, and how HATS might fit into that.
Absolutely happy to. Yeah, so HATS protocol said kind of briefly is tokenized contributor roles for DAOs. So it's a ERC 1155 that the DAO can create as many as they want. They can grant and revoke them, and they're non-transferable by the people who hold them. So you have this kind of token that represents a role or a specific authority that's delegated from the DAO level, and it allows us to. It's kind of like the atomic unit of DAO native structuring for our organizations. The part of the reason for this, so before I get into the coordination flippening, part of the reason that we need this at all is just because we need accountability in DAOs, and bringing sufficient, like, minimum viable structure into our organizations is fundamental to getting to greater scales of coordination. And ultimately, like, it's a primitive, so we're looking for ways that we can experiment and design all different types of organizational structures using HATS. The coordination flippening, when I wrote it originally, was this idea that basically DAOs are going to eventually outcompete traditional organizations based on how effectively they can coordinate, how the scale of resources they're able to manage and accumulate, and the level of complexity of the problems that they can solve repeatedly. And actually, Spencer kind of, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, was like, "Hey, you ever read Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, the talking about disruptive innovations?" And I was like, "Oh, interesting." And having revisited this idea of DAOs outcompeting traditional organizations through the frame of being a disruptive innovation, actually is helping me make a lot more sense of it. And Spencer, jump in whenever you feel called to. I'll say that one of the key properties of disruptive innovation is it starts, Clay Christensen talks about, like, the chip manufacturing industry and how that grew. It starts out taking, like, niche use cases and outcompeting the market in those, because the incumbents can't focus on that market because it's too small. So you have, like, a multi-billion-dollar company that is focusing on serving its biggest clients and doing product development in a way that's informed by those customers. And then there's some other use case that comes in that's like maybe 1% or 0.01% their market size. And I said, there's no way we can spend R&D dollars on developing for this new market, because ultimately, like, it doesn't, that's it's not going to make a difference for a business. So this new innovation, disruptive innovation, comes along and starts serving that market and being able to build out this solution and then use that as a ratchet to increase its capacity, increase the advancement of the technology and the number of people who are using it. And just projecting that onto DAOs, it makes perfect sense. DAOs have done investment clubs. DAOs have done protocol parameter adjustments in like the simplest possible sense. And DAOs have done social groups. But then you try to do something like build out a whole product, or more complex coordination issues, and DAOs are not quite there yet. But that is the niche that this disruptive innovation is starting in. So what I'm betting on, my like deep thesis, is around how DAOs will continue to ratchet up the capacity for coordination in a way that eventually advances past the point of what traditional organizations are capable of today. So we'll incrementally pick up more use cases, like building out protocols and products. We're going to do that with Hats, to like demonstrate what we think is possible when you actually start to use Hats protocol. But also, like, we're going to build an amazing organization ourselves. But then eventually, you can think about, like, okay, at what point do you think that Starbucks could be outcompeted by a DAO? Or what point do you think Amazon could be outcompeted by a DAO? Is that 10 years? Is that 50 years? And the other piece I'll add, and then I'll stop talking, is that one of the concepts I got from David in his book about impact networks is this concept of finding the balance between network organizations and hierarchical or hierarchical structures. And I think that the coordination flippening will happen when DAOs are able to subsume all of the functionality that we've had in traditional organizations, where if you wanted to have a hierarchy within a DAO, you can make that, and then you can dissolve it, like David said. But then you also get all the benefits of the network native network capacity, as well as the DAO coordination mechanisms and all of the open source tooling that you can see at other DAOs and replicate within your DAO to advance your capacity to achieve complex goals at scale. So that's what the coordination flipping is all about.
Yeah, thank you for that. So David, in your you had there's a point where you had talked about how our society is very well equipped to solve issues, but maybe not so well equipped to solve more chaotic issues. Does Hats help with that?
Well, I guess is what I would say in response to that is that we've evolved to be really good at addressing kind of very simple and complicated level problems, which are things that have a really clear beginning and end, which have we know what needs to get done from point A to point B, like building a bridge. Right? We have a blueprint. We all know all the different pieces. We have priors that we can learn from. We're good at that type of work, and we can build kind of really predictable structures to get those things done. Where we are challenged is in the level of complexity, where there's not a clear beginning or end, where the future is really unknown, where you can't plan it all out in advance, and so you really have to kind of make sense of the issue from many different angles to even understand it. No single person can even hold level of complexity all on their own, and then start to kind of learn your way forward. As the saying goes, crossing the river by feeling the stones, right? Kind of step by step, learning our way through this complexity. And the chaotic level problems are even a whole other thing altogether, where it's just kind of read and react and just try to bring it down to a level at which we can even make sense of it. So where Hats helps is we, in many DAOs and in networks, we're trying to address kind of big complex issues, and that's great for engaging large numbers of people. But then ultimately, we can break those issues down into kind of lower levels of complexity, down to more kind of complicated, where we see that we need to execute on this thing. We need to build this aspect of the product, or we need to do the specific brand work, or we have a better understanding. We can break these big issues down into kind of more tangible pieces, and at that point, that's when we need a little bit more structure to go execute on them. That's when we can bring in some some role clarity. Who's exactly responsible for what? How are we going to hold each other accountable to that? And so I think a lot of times we start with this this kind of network structure, or we're trying to bring lots of people in, but ultimately we actually need to add some structure when it gets down to the point at which we know what needs to be done, and to go do that work. So the question here really is, again, what is a DAO native way of structuring our organizations? And we believe that roles are the base unit of structure in an organization. Roles have been used for thousands of years, and any time that people have tried to coordinate with one another, they're really useful in terms of knowing what people are responsible for. Also, just as an individual contributor, I need to know what I'm responsible for, and what I'm accountable to, and then I also need the authority from the organization to go make decisions and do that work without having to rely on consensus for everything. So this is where HATS really plugs in. It's a DAO native way of structuring our organizations in a fashion that still reinforces the values of decentralization and autonomy that are so important.
So, what's the difference between a hat and a role? And I guess anybody can jump in on that one. Yeah.
On technical definitions, you got to go to Spencer, for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I think there's a technical answer, and then there's more of a conceptual answer, which is probably more interesting. On a technical level, within HAT's protocol, there isn't a hat is a role. Although there's a little bit of a nuance where, and we probably need to figure out some better language to help make this nuance clearer. But there's the role, and then there's the like token representation of that role. It's the role is like just this thing that exists. It's stored in the HATS smart contract, just as like an object, like in the database, and it has information about. Well, maybe we come back to that, but it has like information about the role, or it may link out to information about the role. But it's just like this thing that sits there, and you can look at it. You can also point to it, and that's what the hat tokens do. So you can almost think about the hat itself like as the role that somebody might fill, and then when somebody fills the role, when they start wearing the hat, it's like the hat that they're wearing is like a tokenized representation of the role. And they're not exactly the same thing. They're one is like, from a technical perspective, one is a pointer to the other. The hat that you wear is the pointer to the real hat, the role itself. So you put on the hat, now you're in the role, or you're filling the role. But somebody else could also like put on a hat for that role. And this makes sense because roles are often like many instances of the same role within an organization. The cleanest example of this is like somebody has a role as a multi-sig signer, right? And there's maybe 9 multi-sig signers. That's all the same, fundamentally the same role. So you can have the same hat that it says like where the role is multi-sig signer, and then 9 different tokens, all with the same token ID. And this is why we use 1155. That basically are just pointing to that role and saying whoever's wearing this hat, whoever has this token in their wallet, is at this point filling that role or wearing that hat. So that, I think we could probably do a little bit better a job in the way we talk about the differences between like a type of hat and hat itself, maybe is one way to say it. Um, but I think what's more interesting than just that technical stuff is how do roles within the concept of hats or within the yeah, within the concept of hats protocol, how does that compare to a traditional role? And I think the difference is something really interesting that I am very keen to explore further and to like build out more a better understanding of in like collectively with our community and our ecosystem, which is that in a traditional organization, you might have a role that kind of just lists what your responsibilities are or your job description or the like what you're supposed to be doing. And it may come with some like a list of things that you're allowed to do, your authorities. And it may come with like a set of things that you're responsible for and accountable to and are allowed to do. But those are just like words on a page or on some server somewhere. They don't actually mean anything until the humans around you like make them real with their behaviors or their like the way that they interact with you. And some of that is still within hats, right? Like if a hat has a description, that's basically the same. Like it might have, if you're wearing this hat, you are responsible for X, Y, and Z. But what's really different is that the hat itself as an NFT can be used in token gating type systems, whether that's on-chain token gating or off-chain token gating to things like GitHub or maybe even a Twitter account or Clarity or Discord or on and on and on. The hat can actually be your key. If you're wearing the hat, that is your key to access the various things that you need to fulfill the responsibilities of your role. So we're sort of bundling together this idea of access control, or you could even think about it as like single sign-on in an enterprise, or bundling that together with the softer, more human, like responsibility and job description part of roles. And I think that is that pattern of combining this softer stuff with this harder stuff is actually really common within DAOs and is one of the more unique things that DAOs can do. And I'm very excited about what that combination can unlock in terms of new ways of constructing organizations or structuring them and new ways of behaving within organizations.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if somebody could kind of walk us through a little bit with how it does provide access. A good example is this space itself, right? Like it's you guys are metacartel grant recipients, and this spaces itself is a metacartel inspired, I guess, space, uh, for lack of a better term on the spot. Um, but in order to put this on, I tried to get access to the Metacartel Twitter account, which wasn't given to me, and I understand that. Like, I'm not, I understand why somebody wouldn't want to just give out Twitter access to everybody that is in the DAO. It doesn't make any sense to do that. How could hats have fixed that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're actually playing around with uh, hat gated access to post to Twitter for DAOs. It's like one of our most requested features, and we have like a hacked together version right now, and like maybe a better version with sharded keys coming soon. Um, and I'll say that there's two important authorities here. One is the ability to host the space, right? So using the account. So instead, you created a new account so that you would have that authority, but then like you hold the authority of this account, and then how do people understand that it's credible versus how could you get access to the metacartel account and use that, and for how long and on what basis, and how nuanced can we get with that? and the other one is access to the space. So in this case, the space itself is open, but maybe you would want to hat gate or token gate somehow the people who wanted to come into the space. Twitter is a little bit of a difficult example because they don't have like as nuanced role permissions as say Discord. But if we were to do it in Discord, you would say you can very easily connect a hat because it's an ERC 1155, so it works out of the box with any token gate, whether that's Collabland, Guild, XYZ, even Zodiac, and you just got to make sure that the right hat is in the wallet. We think about token gates as needing tokens and gates. So the gates are the platforms that I just listed, and the tokens in this case would be hats. And the benefit of using hats as opposed to other tokens is you can really get nuance in the types of tokens that you're granting to contributors or people to signify their roles. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect solution. If you just want to use it to token gate one thing, like you kind of you have a jackhammer and you're just like just getting a little shovel to plant a small plant in the ground. Like it's not exactly a good fit. But where hats become really useful is when you connect them to lots of different things. So if you have you have a particular contributor who's working on marketing, and you not only need to be able to post to the Twitter, but you also want to be able to access the budget that's allocated to that small group. Maybe that's sitting in a multi-sig and being able to sign that multi-sig, and you have shared D-work platform where you're managing your tasks, and you are writing together using Google Docs. You can use the same hat to hatgate all of those things. So it's all one token ID, and several people have that token ID, a token of that token ID in their wallet, and they can all get access to these collaborative platforms to have agency as a group. So just to bring it back to your question, I think if I were to try to do this, I would say having it in a place that has more functionality that's token gateable, and then using a combination of a great token gate and hats as the token is like the baseline case of solving any of the problems. Did I answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I forgot what my next question was, but something that Spencer sort of touched on a little bit, and I'm interested in learning a little bit more, is even just the psychological effect of wearing a hat. And just putting on that persona of wearing a hat, because like you could be working on something for an hour or two that is one hat, and then maybe take off that hat and put on your next hat, and then have to be somebody totally different, right? Like it's a have you guys ever heard of Sasha Fierce, who is like Beyonce's stage name, right? Like when she goes on stage, I guess that Beyonce is normally a very, reserved person in her real life, but when she gets on stage, she's aggressive and becomes Sasha Fierce, right? Like she puts on this other persona in order to perform, right? So I'm just wondering if that's something that if you feel that hats could actually increase performance of the wearer, and maybe David, if you want to tackle that one.
I do think even in collective work, we need to be able to delegate down to the level of the individual, to trust individuals to make decisions and do their work. We can work really effectively in groups to collectively do sense making and clarify next steps and so forth. But ultimately, we are living these lives as individuals, and we are the ones who are working on our computers or having these phone calls, and ultimately I think the kind of the base unit of work is an individual's capacity to move things forward, and so I think what often happens, what I've seen so much in collective work, is that individual people are either hesitant to kind of make decisions or move things forward as an individual, or they're kind of not allowed to, because everything has to go through consensus or kind of collective decision making process, and that just is really hard. It slows things down. I think it actually waters down decisions. And so the question for me is, how can we empower individual contributors with the context they need, the information they need, with the authorities and permissions they need, and then also with the accountabilities to be able to do their work. And accountabilities goes both ways, right? It's what is the individual accountable to the collective, and then also what can the individual count on the collective for in return, as far as compensation or rewards, whatever that might be. So I think the context of what are you responsible for and what are you going to be held accountable for is, maybe it seems constraining, but I actually think it's really empowering for individuals to know that I'm being tasked with, I'm being trusted to take on this specific domain of work. It's this tracheopterics, it's called a constrained delegation. We need to be able to delegate, but not delegate kind of in super broad ways where we're delegating to someone to make decisions on every context. No, I think we can find better ways to delegate to individuals and even teams, but within a specific domain of their expertise. And knowing that you have the trust and the responsibility to move a specific piece of work forward means that you can then make decisions, and you can do work without having to check with everybody all the time, and of course you're still accountable to the collective, so the power still rests in with the collective. But I really do think it's a huge unlock to actually getting work done, because again, I think individuals are kind of the base unit of work of how work actually gets done, and we need to be able to trust individuals and give them the authority and the power they need to do that work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, we'll go back to another technical one. So this will probably be for you, Spencer. Like, how does somebody even get a hat? Like, who decides who gets a hat? How does that all work?
Yeah, good question. And I think this is probably the area where questions like this are probably where there's going to be the most need for common patterns to emerge. Like, this is not specified in HATS protocol, basically. HATS protocol is agnostic to that question, basically. Um, the technical answer is that the creator of a hat has to be wearing a hat themselves. Um, so they have to have been delegated by the DAO to be able to create hats or delegate further to other people, create new roles by creating new hats, which of course leads to a question of how did they get that hat in the first place? And that leads us all the way. So the idea kind of is that hats they create a tree structure that we call a hat tree. So there are, getting a little bit into the weeds here, but just to give you some concrete sense, there are 28, technically 29 levels in this hat tree that actually forms a bit of a hierarchy, which is a little bit counterintuitive in some senses, because we're trying to get away from hierarchies, but it's a hierarchy of information, of roles rather than people. So it's more of a fluid, it allows fluid hierarchy, multiple hierarchies, fluid because it can change and the roles can change and they can be turned on and off, and new people can come into them and wear different hats depending on the context, the needs, what the DAO is trying to do, etc. But it's a hierarchy nonetheless. So there's hats that are admins of other hats. And that leads to the question of, well, how does the first hat happen? The first hat is the root of the tree, and we call that the top hat. And so that is the only hat that serves as its own admin. So you can basically, anybody can create a new top hat, and then once they have the new top hat, then they can create hats underneath that. But because hats are NFTs, all they are items in a wallet. So they're an NFT associated with an Ethereum address. And that address, if it has the hat, it has a balance of one of that particular hat. And that's all it is. So that means that address could be any Ethereum address. It could be an EOA, just an individual person in their MetaMask. It could be a multi-sig. It could be a DAO, like any type of DAO, a Moloch DAO, a governor DAO. It could be like the new Element Council DAO framework. It could be anything. Or it could be another contract that has like an immutable contract that has logic embedded inside of it. It literally could be anything. So there's a big design space to explore about how hats are governed and the rules that are applied to how hats get created or revoked or transferred or expire, etc. And so there's this where we imagine this rich ecosystem of plugins, of modules, of patterns, of other kinds of logic that help that basically are that DAOs can take and just start using within their own implementation of hats within their organization. So there's a lot to explore here.
One thing you had mentioned is transferability. Can a hat wearer transfer their responsibilities to somebody else? So since it is an NFT, can somebody just send that NFT to somebody else, or is it an SBT more style where it's non-transferable?
Yeah, the hats are non-transferable. So the admin can transfer the hat, but the wearer of the hat, the person or the address that has the hat token in their wallet cannot transfer that token. You could contrive or construct a scenario in which if the admin, or rather the address that wears the admin hat, were a contract that exposed a certain function that allows the wearer of the child hat to call it to transfer its own hat, you could allow that. So there's ways in the protocol to get around that constraint. If for whatever reason that's relevant for that particular role for that particular DAO. But the default is that roles cannot be transferred away from the person that is fulfilling them at that moment. They can be renounced.
Okay.
So the hat can be taken off by the person that's wearing it, which is important. But I can't just like abdicate my responsibilities and give them to somebody else without permission from the DAO or from the hats above me.
Right, and so I can definitely see why the ability to renounce that becomes important, because somebody might not just want the hat, right? Or
And
for what,
yeah,
or for whatever reason.
right, we probably are going to be exploring maybe being even more intentional about that kind of question. And maybe you can't even mint a hat to somebody without their consent in the first place. That doesn't exist right now, though we're thinking about ways to implement that in a simple and safe way.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Ron in the audience. Floor is yours, sir. Go right ahead. Ron Rivers? Hopefully he's not on the same on a computer going through the same problem as earlier, but feel free to jump in whenever you want, Ron, if you have a question. We're almost like we're 55 minutes in already. I was like, oh my goodness, my first time ever doing one of these like this, and I was a little bit concerned that was going to be able to fill an hour, and you guys have been awesome guests and have just killed this hour in many ways, and I really appreciate that because my normal day-to-day hat is not an outgoing type of person, so I was also a little bit worried about whether or not I could even do this, put this hat on, and you guys have really helped me out a lot. Um, but yeah, Ron, if you want to jump in, if not, we can. You guys can maybe give a little conclusion if you like. If not, we'll start wrapping it up. If there's anything else that is there anything I didn't ask that you guys wanted to let everybody know about?
Well, I'll just say you've been great, and thank you so much for having us. We love to take Ron's question. I'm having trouble hearing you, Ron, if you're speaking.
Sorry, guys. I'm having a toddler meltdown at the moment. I had a quick question. So I really appreciate you guys making the time to talk about this. I'm curious, how is the HATS model different than the Metropolis model, if at all?
Great question. We get this question all the time. We just talked with Julia and Chase at MCon, actually. So it was a great chance to talk about this and hear their angle on it too. And what we found is kind of our common understanding so far is that pods are really top level. They're also just on mainnet, so that's one thing. But they're really this top level delegation of how do you take a DAO and turn it into sub DAOs. You take the whole DAO and turn it into pods. And they were thinking about ways that we could use hats within a pod, so you get like that level, that nuanced level of granular delegation. I guess philosophically, we have a different hypothesis, which is that the baseline atomic unit of DAOs is a pod versus the baseline atomic unit of DAOs is a role or an individual who is participating in a group or getting work done on behalf of the DAO. And we think that access control, permissions, accountability, context, and compensation really need to be granular to the level of someone who's literally sitting down at their laptop and writing code or doing design or sending out tweets like that. That's how we think things get done in DAOs. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, awesome.
Any other questions from the audience? Great. Well, one of the things I'll say, just in terms of we didn't get to talk about it, but one of the kind of like cool, exciting things we're thinking about is how there's this evolution in hats from manual delegation towards increasingly automated delegation. And hats is a primitive, but one of the things that we've built into the primitive is, like Spencer said, this field that's an address. It could be any address that is determining the eligibility of someone to wear a hat and when it should be revoked. And we start out with that being a DAO where the DAO is saying, okay, you should have this hat, you should not have this hat. Let's do it through DAO governance. But we think that over time, a very large percentage of hats will be delegated automatically, and using basically bring your own contract logic into your hats tree and be able to say, okay, you have certain reputation, you have certain badges, you have signed a certain number of transactions lately. Whatever logic you want to use as a way of saying someone is up to date and respected in the DAO. That's things that we're going to be able to build together as an ecosystem of open source collaboration around HATS protocol. So that's something we're really excited about. And yeah, I know we just hit the 2:00 mark, so thank you so much for having us. It's always fun to jam, and looking forward to talking more about this.
Thank you very much. How can everybody find you guys? Where on the social great big world can everybody find you guys if they want to
Yeah,
communicate
we're
to you?
at Hats Protocol on Twitter here, and then we have a new website coming soon. In the meantime, the most useful place to follow along is on our GitHub, open source GitHub repo. Also, just Hats Protocol, Hats dash Protocol over there. And if you're looking as of October, you probably want to check out the beta branch on the Hats Protocol repo.
Okay, cool. And speaking of, we'll just wrap it up with a little bit, but speaking of the repo, is there any way that if anybody wanted to contribute to Hatch Protocol, is anybody able to do that? And if so, is there any specific items of help that you guys need that maybe
Yeah, so
somebody listening might be able to come in and help you guys out with?
definitely. It's an open source project, so just submit a PR if you see something that you want to work on. We've had someone do that already, and it was a really cool experience. But if you want to go a little bit more depth or larger contributions, just hit us up. We are going to put out some information soon about specifically what we're looking for in a call for contributors. Our manifesto is all coming soon. We really could use help with just general smart contract engineering. We're going to do an audit soon. We're looking toward building more front end interpretation of what's in the protocol, and especially design. If you're a great designer, want to build like a brand new organizational tool, then yeah, please hit us up.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. And this was recorded, and I will make sure that the links are available to you guys if you want to share it.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been great.
It was. Thank you. All right, guys. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.